Hi, y'all. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm going to be talking about unique challenges for adult students. I am specifically going to be talking about adult high school students. Right. Hi, my name is Jesse, and I have about 20 years of experience teaching adult learners. I've worked for community colleges to correctional facilities to adult high schools. And even when I wasn't in an educational setting as a supervisor, I always I made sure to, professional development and things like that for my employees. Right. So, always working with adult learners. And here are just some of the things that I compiled, especially working in this adult high school. And so, starting off with this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a lot of you as educators may be familiar with this, but I definitely want to hit on some of these things, specifically down here towards the bottom, because these are some of the more fundamental things that our students need to be successful in the classroom. Right. So, physiological needs are definitely going to hit on some of those. And if we're successful with all of these towards the bottom of the triangle, then our students can hopefully make it up to the top of that self-actualization. But even a lot of adults who have been in workforce for a while still never actually reach that self-actualization. But let's go ahead and get started. And so one of those first things, one of those base physiological needs that your students will need to be successful is to be fed. Right, there's a lot of issues with food insecurity, especially now with the prices at the grocery stores the way they are. Our students, they dropped out, so a lot of times they don't have the most successful employment history, right? And so, food insecurity, if your students are hungry, they are not going to be focused, right? There are some studies shown that towards the end of the month, when food stamps, what I used to call them when I was younger, when they start to run out, when that food welfare assistance starts to run out, uh, towards the end of the month, students are a lot less focused, a lot less engaged, and more likely to get in trouble in their schools, right? So that also, our students as adults, they deal with food insecurity. And so it's always important to make sure that, keep that in mind as students. Don't take it for granted, just because we usually have the benefit of, not having to deal with food insecurity. It's important to remember that our students may need some resources like a food pantry, right? We partner up with the Central Texas Food Bank, and they help keep our food pantry supplied. Teachers also bring in things, and other staff members will bring in food for our students. And teachers individually in their classroom will keep a little box or something like that of snacks. I don't do it too often, but every now and then, towards the end of the terms, I will bring in like waffles and nachos and things like that. Just make sure to keep, what do you call those guys? The food, not the food critics, food inspectors, right? Safety inspectors. So make sure that you are following all the rules, because we have had, in our case, someone came by. They were doing some kind of like a food inspection for some other part of the building, but they stumbled across our sandwich bar. Right, where students go and they make their sandwiches. We were told we couldn't do that, that we may even be shut down if we continue to do that. So, you got to make sure that you are following the food safety protocols. But that is an issue for our students. With other physiological needs goes housing, right? We do, especially in this area, have a lot of housing insecurity. People are being priced out. Even people with really successful jobs that get paid well, they're getting priced out of the area. So definitely our students are feeling this. And, it's one of those things that definitely a barrier for students. And sometimes it affects them so much that we actually had to start doing these sweeps of our campus before we closed on the weekend, because students were actually trying to sneak into a classroom and sleep there through the weekend. And so, I had to make sure that we were doing sweeps of our classrooms and things like that before we left, to make sure that students weren't, staying in there over the weekend. And this comes with other issues, things like hygiene, right? If someone doesn't have a place, they may be dealing with some hygiene issues, clothing issues, and sometimes mental health issues, right? People who are homeless sometimes deal with higher issues, higher levels of mental health. And so, you got to be careful with all the different things that come with housing. And so it's important to try to have any housing resources. Make sure that your life coaches, student success coaches, have places where they can maybe help them get housing or a temporary shelter. And, without that, it's going to be very difficult for students to be successful in your course. So physical safety, this is one of those things where not so much within the school, we are very fortunate not to have like fights or, a lot of drama within the school. But sometimes, with that homelessness, there comes that having to navigate the streets, and there's that kind of safety we have to deal with where students have to deal with. But there's also issues like domestic violence and domestic issues where we've had to let the front desk know that, hey, this person, they've threatened their partner, which is our student, and so if they come on site, we have to have the police show up right away. We've had to have lockdowns because of domestic issues, and so just make sure that you are staying on top of these things and not lacking in the or slacking in safety, so that the rest of your students are their safety is accounted for. So definitely something that does come up with adults that doesn't really happen with students, with younger students. A lack of childcare. A lot of our students actually they dropped out the first time around because they didn't have childcare. Right, this lack of childcare is definitely going to hinder your students from showing up to class. Right, so if there is no childcare for your students, you can't really expect a high level of attendance. We've partnered up with we actually have a childcare center within our school. It's not exclusively for our students or our community members who have access to it, right? But it does help a lot of our students. And when the students do have that childcare, they're usually more engaged with the school. And that's credit to our childcare center because they make sure that parents come in and they put in some volunteer hours for the services that they get, their childcare services. Right. So, and if you don't have one within the school, make sure that you partner up with some organization that can help with that childcare, even if it's just I forget what that term is, but even when they supplement some funds for childcare, any little bit will help your students because without that it's not gonna be a lot of success. So employment, whether your students have gainful employment or they don't have it, if they have that gainful employment, sometimes it's an issue of students missing class because of their job, right? So, if they miss too much class, you have to make sure to follow those student guidelines, the student policies. Ours is you miss 5 days and you lose credit for the course. So just making sure that students are respecting policies when they have a job. I've had some students say, well, my job lets me out, at this time. So every day I'll just show up for the last 30 minutes of class. And that just is not acceptable because they're not really getting educated if they're just showing up for 30 minutes every day. Right. So, and then other students who don't have a job, sometimes they may be focused on, getting that job. As a teacher, as success coaches, life coaches, it's important that we help our students through that process, help them get that job. But that can also take away time and attention from classwork, right, from school. So just whether they have employment or they don't have employment, sometimes that can be a barrier to students. Then we have our legal issues. I recently had a student who her grandmother passed away. Her grandmother had left her with, in her will, left her pretty much everything, but some of her family members came in and kind of changed that at the last minute. And so she was asking me, like what options she has. I really didn't know. I referred her to a free legal clinic in the area, which she took advantage of. Unfortunately, things didn't look too good for her case, but and then we've had other students who they're have domestic issues, custody issues, things like that. One year, I even had a student who was arrested by U.S. Marshals during the school day. Was in class. The student was in my class. He always kind of, was a little bit cognizant of like he always wore. I think it's called a baklava. Those kind of like military headgear things that they wear in the special forces and things like that. SWAT teams. Eventually, it turns out that he had shot someone. He knocked on the door. Someone answered. He shot him in the face. And he was waiting to go to trial on that, and he was at school while he was waiting to go on trial. And it's not the first time I've saw students who had shot someone and they were on campus as students, but they do deal with legal issues and things like that, and so that's going to be a hindrance to some of our students, right? So just making sure that you do know some of the resources available to them and just realize that legal issues are a very real thing for adult students. And so this one is one of those super tricky situations to navigate because your educational background, some students, graduated from college in their home countries, but they don't have a diploma in the US, a high school diploma, so they have to come get their high school diploma here, or they sometimes they can get it so that it's transferred to the US and they go to college, but a lot of times they need to get some of these high school basics before they move on to like community college or those things around here. But sometimes students, they weren't even literate in their own home countries when they show up here, or even like if they're US, they've been in the US their whole lives. Some of them can't read at above an elementary school grade level. And so it's very tricky when you have students who are ahead of the curve and those who are kind of on the slower part of that. And so it's very difficult to navigate a classroom when you're trying to do both of those things. The way I do it is through self-paced video lessons that I create, where I'm basically lecturing, but I have questions, knowledge checks, and just critical thinking questions throughout my lectures. So, it's a video though, so students can pause, rewind. If they don't need to do that, they can just go at a normal pace or a quicker pace and finish up their coursework. But it's not really a stress to me because it's self paced, right? So some students are going faster, some a little bit slower, but in the end, it all works out if you do kind of a self paced type of class. And all of these things that I mentioned will affect attendance, right? Attendance is affected by all of these different things: housing, food, legal issues. And something that surprised me the first time I taught, when I was in the women's prison campus, correctional institution, I didn't really have to worry about attendance because there weren't a lot of places to go for our students, right? So that was kind of like their highlight of their day, is coming to class and just kind of having a distraction from the rest of their day, right? But when I moved to our community campuses, I noticed that attendance, that first term that I taught, I thought I messed up big. I looked around and halfway through the term and I was like, what did I do? I've lost half of my class. I must be doing something wrong. So I went and asked other teachers and, saw that they were in the same situation. That's just the way it is with our adult students. They are all at risk students, at high risk students for dropping out, right? And so every single one of our students is at that high risk because of all the different barriers they're facing, right? So I just had to realize, and I've had to kind of talk other teachers through this: is, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. It's not your fault. This is the nature of the students that we deal with, right? It's so many barriers for them to overcome just to be here on a day-to-day basis that it's just bound to happen, right? So all of these things will affect attendance, and it's our job to try our best to limit all of those barriers so that attendance is high. But we are not saviors, as I mentioned in my last video. As much as we want to be, we just we can't save everyone, and we shouldn't be striving for that, right? We are not saviors. We are teachers. And so, just some of the recap: food insecurity. Make sure that you have some kind of food pantry there for your students. Maybe snacks within the classroom. Try to partner up with a local food bank or nonprofit if there's one. Housing insecurity. Making sure that if you have counselors or life coaches, success coaches, that they are connected to the housing resources. I know we have some in this area where you apply, and if you qualify, they'll help you pay for like your down payment and a few other things. Sometimes we do have funds available for students who it's an emergency and they just need like a weekend housing, and so we spring for a hotel or something like that. And so, just make sure there are some resources there for housing. Very difficult for a student. Oh, and the things that come with it, right? Like hygiene, lack of clothing, and food insecurity if someone is homeless. Make sure that you have the resources to break down those barriers a little. Lack of childcare, like I said, a lot of students dropped out because they got pregnant the first time, and so they have those children and they need something to do with them. And a lot of times when our students don't have that childcare, they do not last very long at school because there's no one to watch their kids for them, and that's a very understandable, reason not to be able to come to school. But we make sure that there is some kind of childcare resource. If your campus doesn't have a facility on campus, then try to find maybe some kind of financial resources or partnerships where students can find that childcare. Without that, its attendance is going to be an issue. Employment, again, whether they have it or they don't, sometimes this can be an issue. If they are gainfully employed, make sure that they know ahead of time, hey, does your schedule align? Does your work schedule align with the school schedule? If not, let's move some classes around because we can't have you just showing up for 20, 30 minutes and every day and expecting to pass a class. Right. And whether if they don't have that job, but they're trying, try your best, right? Help them with resumes, practice mock job interviews, whatever it is they need. Make sure that you have those employment resources available. Legal issues. This is a very tricky one. Um, as I mentioned, there can be some severe legal issues that you're dealing with. Sometimes it is, in my case, homicide when I was dealing with some students. Others, it's custody issues. Whatever it is, legal issues. Make sure that you can have at least some type of resource available. Like I said, free legal clinics would probably be the best one if you have any in the area. Educational background. Some students, again, come in and they were illiterate in their own home country and they are expecting you to teach them high school level work. And then you have others who graduated college in their own home countries, but they need this high school piece of paper, this US high school piece of paper. And so, because of that imbalance and that huge fluctuation of like levels, skill levels, educational levels, then my suggestion is a self-paced course where you have these video lessons. It's like a blended learning model, and that works really well. We'll talk about adult teaching strategies later, learning strategies, but that's one of my favorites. Is just that self-paced blended learning where you don't really have to worry about differences in educational background because if it's self-paced, you just have to make sure you have extra work for the ones that move faster and making sure that you're kind of pushing along the slower learners. And then all of these things will affect attendance, right? Without attendance, you can't have success in your class, in your school, because without students showing up, you're not really teaching them anything. They're not really learning anything. And so just make sure that you are keeping all of these challenges in mind. These are unique challenges that adult learners face that usually younger children will not face in their school throughout their schooling, right? So just again, these are some of those main things that students will deal with.